Hello, everybody. You are on the channel Breakfast Show. It is Sunday, 7 p.m. in Moscow. And even though we're not all in Moscow, we're glad to have Dmitry Bykov with us. And hello, Alex. Hello. And our special guest, Alexey Arestovich, for the first time on our show. I think it's the first time we're inviting somebody to dilute our company with Dmitry Bykov. Good evening. So, for those who have not watched our previous issues, who are not familiar with what we do, why did we ask him to come? And I'm very thankful to him for accepting our offer. Very often we talk about him in his absence, so we decided instead of doing that, let's just call him. Mr. Bykov just suggested call Alexei in, and he probably will show up. In reality, our reality is much more shameless than literature. We do like talk about literary topics, but reality is seriously intervening, and we will be talking about different things, including Trump's assassination attempt. And I think in this regard, appearance of Alexey Arestovich in our stream is very timely. And I do want to explain a little more, probably for Alexei, the main scope of our show. Mostly Dmitry Bykov. I'm just a host asking questions and bringing tools to him. But Dmitry Lvovich is usually looking for literary associations to the news that are happening. And we'll show you a little bit of how it works out in the stream on a live demo. Dmitry, what did you think about? What was your first literary association when, for you yesterday, you are in the United States, right? And you probably, according to American distances, you're not too far from the epicenter of those events, at least on the same side, right? So, what was your literary association with this event, if you had any? Oh, I had a good coincidence yesterday in the format of my course in Denver. It's pretty far from the place in Pennsylvania. So I was reading the course where we talked about Stephen King as the prophet, and we brought attempt on Greg Stilson, who was compared with Trump on many occasions. I think everybody in literary circles had a similar association with the character. However, Trump did behave much more honorably and bravely, because the literary character Greg Stilson used some baby to shield himself with, and Trump, in juxtaposition, actually was braver. He showed a bloody fist and, according to news, said fight, even though I thought he was saying fuck for a second. But I do have another literary association that is rather obvious, by the way. Exactly 110 years ago, at the end of July 1914, and it's a historical, not literary association, there was a shot fired by Gavrila Princip, which had similar consequences to the historic events as the shot today could have had. Although back in 1914 the assassination attempt was successful, today Trump had managed to turn his head in the last moment. But the fact that this event could have become a doomsday scenario for the whole world, it's rather obvious, I think. So let's see what maybe we can analyze, what we can deduce, what the consequences will be. Right, absolutely. And we are not going to torture you, Alexei, with the literary associations, but if you do have, please do not be shy. We'll be thankful to you. Otherwise, we'll be asking you regular journalist questions, just like Dmitry Bykov had done. All right, let me torture myself a little. I also have a literary association with this event, although this one with Mark Twain. The rumors about my death have been significantly exaggerated. That was my first reaction to it. Assassination attempt was obvious, and I think it probably will, unfortunately, not be the last attempt, because sadly, in America, things have radicalized, and Trump is in a crosshair of drastic changes. He's an agent of change. He has some experience. He's an ex-president, so he does have experience of intending radical changes that failed to have happened because bureaucracy had prevented him from that. So now he is putting it on the banner to replace tens of thousands of federal bureaucrats. And of course, that's a lot of destruction for them. So that group is actively resisting. And the fact that some inadequate person attacked Trump yesterday, that's one thing. That's one thing. But there would be and could be other more adequate people who are upset with Trump and his agenda. So it's far from over, I think. God help him to survive the elections. I'm not Trumplican, but I do want him to succeed in this case. Oh, wow, that's impressive. Sorry, I cannot not ask. Alexei, if you are for Trump on this historic step, what do you think he brings to Ukraine? Is he going to give it up to Putin on Putin's terms, or do you see differently? No, Dmitry, he is not going to pacify the conflict on Putin's terms. He is going to follow Trump's terms. And those people who are writing his program, they're from the realpolitik camp. They're the ones who warned even at the beginning of 90s that NATO should abstain from encroaching to the east, and that's basically opening a bunch of Pandora box effects. Schermeyer and Buchanan and a bunch of those people. And they do affect Trump's political views on this matter. And frankly, I'm on a similar basis regarding this conflict. That's why I'm in agreement with him on the future scenario for closure. So how did it turn out, Alexei? I thought that earlier you were addressing this matter from a different angle. You thought that the war would be over in a different fashion for Ukraine. Well, of course, Alexander, but Ukraine should have behaved differently, and the West as well. When I was saying a different point of view, it was not clear how both of them will behave. Ukraine drained down the toilet everything they could and added even more. The West was sort of willy-nilly participating in this war. 60-40%. And since we have seen all these failures to supply weapons from Biden, on all that awakening in Europe, we understood that nothing but realpolitik is an option for us. Because the chances to fulfill at least 10% of the program we talked about in 22, we have none. In Ukraine, we have negative dynamics right now. We are fighting worse in 2024 than back in 2022. Why? Well, first of all, Ukrainian project has a faulty software behind it. If you put the ideology of Ukrainian Liberation Army, you will end up in a little forest hideout, same as they did. And the mistake was done early in the 90s when, on a huge country, polycultural, polynational, they tried to apply a very limited worldview of Liberation Army from the western districts of Ukraine onto the whole thing. The whole Ukraine doesn't fit in that little dugout. Zelensky came on the slogans supporting polyethnic and polycultural project, a return to that, but in reality, being afraid of the influence of radicals and forgetting that politics is done for millions and not for a small group of those who scream the loudest in the streets. He continued implementing the same politics that was done before, that he promised to struggle with, to fight with, and unfortunately the faulty view of the world creates propaganda with all these flaws in propaganda push people to make wrong decisions, and they start supporting people with a point of view that is faulty, that is false. And then you get people with false viewpoints on life up top, and it leads to the collapse of the system. All right, hang on. One more question. Alexei, I remember that Trump had pretty good relations with Zelensky to start with. Zelensky said that they used quite a few things that Trump was using back in America. And as two showmen, they had quite a bit of understanding between them, it seemed. Trump was asking for some compromise on Biden, but I don't think that ever happened. So what do you think will happen with Zelensky and Trump's relations? Well, Dmitry, I think Zelensky needs to live longer as political figure than Trump, if he can, but I doubt he will, for these relations to happen. Because he probably will overlive Trump as a political figure maybe from November for a few months, and after that he will go in decline. All right, sorry, Alexander, that's your turn now. Right, I'm trying to bring back our conversation to our usual flow with literary associations and such, and we'll ask Alexei more about Trump and Ukraine. I do have several questions prepared, but before we go there, you have shared your literary associations, and I'm the only one who hasn't. So I did want to share mine, and obviously I have read only one book in my life, and that's Master and Margarita, but it has a very good place there. Remember when they're transporting a hobo to the psychiatric ward, and they're driving past the monument to the poet Pushkin, and the driver, who's also a poet, is saying, well, look at Pushkin. He's an example of real luck. Whatever he does, whatever happened to him, everything was helping. Everything turned into his favor, to his glory. But I do not understand, what has he done? Is there anything special about his poems? Nothing, really, but they became popular. He got lucky that Dantes guy shot him and broke his femur, and Pushkin died, but that led him to immortality as a literary agent, so he was super lucky. So I think that was my association with Trump. When people are saying that he's so lucky, I'm just remembering that poem, that book. Right, he's so lucky that he got shot. Well, here there is a direct literary association. Guy Debord, the author of a very classic work, Société de Spectacle, had said that in a modern society it's impossible to admire chivalry and strength and courage, so that there would not be some other spectacle play scenario played as well. And now there are theories that, yeah, there was a shot, but Tom blooded his own ear with some special effects. So my question to both of you, are you sure that the actual assassination attempt happened? Because let's be obvious that it does make the victory of Trump in the next elections almost 100%. And if you ask the old question, who benefits from it, it seems that the only one person benefiting from it is Trump. So what opinions do you have about it? What do you think, Alexei? I think it's a absolutely real person having shot at him. If he had a profile with some Antifa mentions there, that's really their modus operandi. He also put explosives in his vehicle, apparently, and he was shooting the way he could. He's not a professional, obviously, because professionals do not aim at the head. Why? Why not? Because it's difficult to shoot the moving target, and head moves most. If you remember, what's his name? Federico, who wrote The Day of the Jackal, right, about the attempt at de Gaulle. Do you remember why the shooter missed? Because de Gaulle bent over to kiss a veteran. And the shooter, Anglo-Saxon, had not imagined such a tradition, so he was not expecting de Gaulle to bend. And that's why snipers usually don't aim at the head, because it's more difficult. And instead you have a very big target as his body, so professional would be shooting at the body. But, depends what you use, right? Body is a complex thing. Well, sure, but, if it's a real attempt, they could have poisoned the bullet and used the bigger caliber, This one was just an inadequate person. He took some smaller caliber, but he was aiming at the head. And shooters aim at the head not to scare and not to warn, but to kill. So that was a real attempt at his life. And there are real victims, too. Among the viewers, people have died. Right, yes, they have. Right, from the classics I do remember Chekhov surgery. I should have used the goat's leg tool on this. Right, that's my literary allegation here, speaking of caliber. And by the way, I hope there will not be any theatricals with this. I'm saying that if you'll see more attempts at Trump's life, that's just an underline that a lot of people want him out of the race. So when Alexei mentioned that literary aspect, I did remember association from Alexander Bauman from Carnegie, and he wrote the following. It turns out that any young Raskolnikov who wants to better the world by removing an ugly granny from it will probably kill also her sister Elizaveta, who is absolutely innocent, so there'll be innocent bystanders killed, and in the real world probably the granny will survive. So let's talk about the real world implications. And as Alexei mentioned, the shooter could have been an Antifa. It's difficult to deduce all the details because he was registered as a Republican. Doesn't mean that he was a Republican. Anyone can say that. But on the other hand, he did donate some $15 to Democratic Party, which also is an interesting element, or some organization related to Democratic Party. And the fellow was only 20 years old, so he was not too well formed in his life, one can say. Do we have a similar hero of some shape and capacity in world literature? Well, of course, the most obvious is Johnny Smith, who decided to stop Stilson. But since we are remembering different things, and Alexei brought up Mark Twain, remember how I was elected to be a governor. I was failing to understand how my small persona is such an obstacle to all these kind of people. So I'm still puzzled why Trump's person is so fatal for many, why people are going to go at him again, you think? He has been a president once, nothing changed much. Why it's so critical to remove Trump now if it was a real attempt? Why is he such a thorn in the side of the deep state? Well, Dmitry, it was not deep state that organized that, as far as we know. This was just one inadequate person who done it. But you were saying that there might be capabilities of those too. Yes, and they're afraid, in my view, because he made right conclusions from his first presidency, and he's going to be more radical in the second term. He has promised to bring 25,000 people who will change the whole top of bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. And what is that bureaucracy? That's clans that were formed in the half a century, probably, who had their way to milk the system, to make money, to conduct certain politics. So this is a discussion about changing power. And for changing power, for power, that's what people get killed for. You know, if we're talking about literary things here, then Bunin, in his damn days, he was talking about the break in the society so deep that civil war was inevitable back in the early 20th century in Russia. Do you think Trump and the United States are somewhere in a similar situation? No, Dmitry, I don't think there is a potential for civil war in the United States. There is probably a potential for some BLM and some Antifa resistance. They might topple a few cars and set some things on fire and get into fighting police. But for civil war, you need two very well-defined powers who are very well organized and who are eager to fight. America, however, is at a loss. At a loss, you can maybe fight out in the streets, but there could not be a civil war with that. For civil war, you need a really strong force that has a strict picture of the world, that has a good potential and is ready to implement that viewpoint, even at the cost of enforcement. For America, there's a lot of upset, but there's no organization to fight one against the other. Does Trump have a picture of the future? No, I don't think he has the future very detailed out. He's a very impulsive person. I think he bases his actions on refusal to adopt these leftist ideas and leftist processes. He, as a good old American, is triggered by that, he's angered by that vector, but if you ask him what exactly do you want, they cannot always provide an answer, a coherent answer. That's the problem of modern America. Democrats cannot answer the question, why does America need a politics of globalism, nor Republicans, conservatives can answer why isolationism. You know what I paid attention to? All American leaders and politicians, they were talking about roughly the same, and Trump, however, he positioned himself as an anti-system character. They're all talking about the same point. They used the same word, unity. And Trump himself, who I cannot say always worked for unity, he is using this word, and he started using it after the assassination attempt. And all people are saying that they're praying for those who died, for Trump to recover. And I did pay attention to Zelensky's statement, who also wished Trump good health. And I do understand that he probably does not like what is happening in the United States, and he is not too happy about the perspectives of Trump, probably guaranteed winning the elections. But he still said that rather quickly, by the way. It did not pass a week or more days, right? Oh, yeah, right. Only Zakharova missed the target in this case, a Russian speaker who talked about that as being a staging. But that once again outlines how far low did Russia fell. And if we talk about literary things, remember Yankee at the court of King Arthur? One of the characters said that the main character cannot coexist with Merlin. There cannot be two bears in the same cave. So what do you think how Trump and Putin will interact? Because there is a feeling, at least with me, that if not with the class or their worldviews, but there is some commonality between them. Are you hinting at Hitler and Stalin in this case? No, 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 not that direction. But I do feel that there may be some dynamics between them. Well, no. Trump actually believes in the politics of two ultimatums. He would send people to Putin to suggest, hey, let's come to peace accords. These are conditions rather beneficial for you. If you refuse, we'll give Ukraine a ton of arms and Ukraine will kick your ass out. And then send emissaries to Ukraine and explain that Ukraine, you either adopt these terms and we support you and support your army and recovery, or if you refuse, we stop supporting you at all. And some people in the circles of Trump, they do express some concerns about this double ultimatum, because what happens if one side does not accept it? Then the whole plan falls apart and there is no answer, there is no scenario B yet. Because right now they think that this suggestion will be fruitful and that rational players will adopt it. Problem is that Zelensky is irrational and Putin has another rationality. It is not based on the same logic as the West. And that's a concern. So we'll see what happens. Trump will most likely be elected. He will most likely will present a double ultimatum. And if one side or both sides tell him no, then the ultimatum will fall apart. We saw a glimpse of it with North Korea when he went to strike peace with Kim Jong-un and sent 3 aircraft carriers and huffed and puffed, and Kim said no, and that attempt had fallen through. So this is the weak side of Trump's politics, because he does have a tank-like pressure, but he doesn't have a second plan. Remember, he reminds me of a general who wanted to drink with Stirlitz in 17 Moments of Spring, the general commander of the tank brigade. But if that pressure, if that energy does not achieve the result, there is not much behind it. And Zelensky and Putin both are aware of it. Zelensky is figuring out his own intrigue, and Putin is like a steady escalator, is pressing his own line. So if they want to, they can probably deflect or do not pay attention to Trump's pressure. And I don't know, we have an answer then. So what does Zelensky want? Zelensky wants a counteroffensive. He is aggregating 14 more brigades and he's trying to set another counteroffensive effort in motion. I do not believe that's even possible. I can open you a scary truth. A month and a half ago in NATO, they modeled another counteroffensive and they told Zelensky, under no conditions you should go for this. There'll be another bloodbath, another Ilovaisk-like event, and the collapse of the front, after which we all would not know what to do. To which he answered, guys, I know what I'm doing. Everything will be all right. And now on NATO's summit in Washington, he was trying to procure enough resources for his counteroffensive. He was demanding that. He understands that his political time is running out, that the war is going to an end, and the pressure to sit down and negotiate peace is increasing. So sooner or later, that is going to happen. And peace accords and Zelensky, the West, is trying to place an equal sign between them, and Putin is crossing that equal sign because he doesn't want to sit down and sign anything with Zelensky. Zelensky wants to slam the door, or at least get some preferential treatment from the West as a result of perhaps reclaiming back some territory or successful counteroffensive. And the West is telling, no, you barely can survive as you are. And the West is refusing to give him 14 brigades worth of equipment. And Zelensky is trying to play his own games, so it looks like there is some arms that are not going to the front and being reserved for these new brigades that he is forming. We had this experience before when in 22nd, I think, or 23rd, when some of our newly formed battalions started the counteroffensive in the south, and it ended up in rather poorly prepared action with a lot of blood and a lot of death. So can I ask you, Alexey, here one more thing? As you were talking about it, today many people were discussing, Russian propaganda is actively discussing that, the statement by Mariana Bezuglia from Ukrainian Chamber of Congress, who said that, according to some sources, she got information from Syrsky and his surroundings, saying that Syrsky is ready to sign the ceasefire and all the variations to finish this war. He sincerely does not believe that Ukraine can prevail over Russian invaders at its own territory. She wrote in her Facebook, well, she's doing a lot of good things. She's the only public politician that is attacking the Generality Mafia and openly saying that, for the last year and a half, we haven't been the warriors of light. We actually also are waging our war in a bloody and meaty fashion. But propaganda and some mistakes, they're still present. There are two rails of main Ukrainian propaganda. One rail is that Putin wants to conquer the whole Ukraine and destroy it, and he physically cannot do that. He cannot even cross Dnieper, and he barely can do what he's doing now. And the other rail is that Ukraine will prevail, reach Moscow, or even better, even Khabarovsk out in the Far East. And this is the double rail that Ukrainian conscience is running around and bumping into one or the other and cannot leave that framework. And Mariana, with all due respect, when she uses the word capitulation, we're not talking about capitulation. We're talking about the way to end war. Like 95% of wars in the 20th century have finished. No peace, no war. One side maybe got something, the other side got something too. Not mutual annihilation, but mutual dead end, after which some of the sides start screaming we need a rematch, but likely that's what's going to happen here. On one hand, Putin will likely be successful because he has captured some territory. On the other hand, that they expelled so much resources and have taken very little, so there'll be critique of that. Ukraine will be blaming the West, that the West did not support them strong enough, and we have been dumb enough, and we need to regroup and take our lands back. For me, this is all like the dance of small infantile children who do not understand what is happening, what is the price of this question, and what they should be doing. And I'm looking at both positions on both sides. As Maxim Kammerer in the Inhabited Island, if we're bringing literary associations here, by Strugatskys. One crazies are fighting another crazies. Are you feeling yourself as a progressor, Alexey? Oh yeah, my whole life, Alexander. All right, Dmitry, hang on. Let me finish asking the question before you take it. At the beginning of war, I think you, or at least it seemed to me, that you were leaning closer to a different mood, a different expression of goals. And back then, Ukraine had much fewer opportunities, and it seemed that a little push, and Russia will capture Kiev. Well, Russia had fewer opportunities back then as well. Putin made a chain of strategic decisions that changed their vector to the better, and we have made wrong decisions that actually are changing us for the worse. And we're not even recognizing that we have made mistakes. We're just about to see the light of some of them. As for the beginning of war, I was doing my job. I saw that the collective, society as a collective actually was crumbling. I will tell something that I haven't mentioned much before. In the beginning of war, on the 26th, I left the office of the president for a day. I was solving some tasks that were standing in front of us, and I went to Vinnytsky district, and I was returning back to Kiev. So from that district to Kiev, for 300 kilometers plus, was stagnant traffic, a complete flow of refugees from Kiev to the west. My car was about the only one going back. People were waving at me when I was heading that direction. So that was a complete crumbling of a society. And yes, of course, the soldiers and officers, they were fighting bravely on the front, but society was crumbling. And that's what I was doing. I held this situation in the media, in the information sphere. I did not pacify, as people say. That was not the message I was sending. I was sending the message, no panic. If you panic, you drown. And that was the message that I was expressing at that day. In those days. And I was the one who understood the perspectives, actually led one of the subgroups in the Istanbul negotiations, and I understood clearly that on the evening of 24th, when Putin asked for peace negotiations to start them, because they understood that their invasion plan was collapsing. And they were coming to cognition that you cannot capture or pacify Ukraine with a 300,000 army worth. Soviet Union, in order to achieve a similar task, fighting Germany in Ukraine, had to aggregate 2.5 million to get to their goals. Anything below 1 million, it's not it's subpar. It's not enough. And that's what I was doing of this operation, was collapsing. And the logic of this conflict was Vietnam-China conflict like of the 70s, and they needed to go back, like we need to go back here to negotiation tables. And that's the Russia was already pressing for at the beginning, after 2-3 weeks. But Putin did another trick. He understood that the West is not ready. He understood that the West is not enough, doesn't have enough resources to support Ukraine properly. By the 4th of April, we had only 4 shots to the Smerch systems. We basically had nothing to fight with. And the first Rammstein was only on the 6th. And we were riding the situation on our infantry, which was getting about 60,000 shells on their heads daily in those days. And Russia has a longer potential, bigger potential than Ukraine, and it's faster and exceeding the speed of the West, eagerness to support Ukraine. And Russia has a civilizational weapon of a long will, unlike other countries. For 300 years, Russia can be hitting in the same target. In the West, they would have changes of epochal size. Renaissance would replace the medieval times, and Russia would still be slowly creeping up on the left bank of Dnieper in Ukraine. On the right bank, they got much, much later. But for 300 years, they were slowly creeping up on the left. And Putin is doing that. He is hitting in the same over and over again, slowly getting what he wants to. So, Alexey, in this situation, how can Ukraine win, if not military, but moral victory? What can it put against Russia that has a long will, higher potential in mobilization and arms? What can Ukraine do to not lose its face? And can it even do that if the West is refusing to engage to a higher degree? Guys, Ukraine can transform so drastically that Putin would lose an enemy here. That would be an exit that nobody is expecting in some 3D-like fashion. If Ukraine returns back to a polycultural, polyethnic, the way as it was always, a white project as it's called, or is it going to the path of the 5th project, as I'm saying, people know it, then Putin loses the target on Ukraine. There is nobody to attack here. And that's the victory by Sun Tzu, because as he said, the highest class of the leader is the one who is destroying the ideas of the enemy. The worst one is the one who is storming the strongholds. In this case, we completely cannot fight, and Putin is the lowest class of leader. So you're like Katz, you're suggesting to surrender? No, I'm not suggesting to surrender. But I'm saying, why should I live in the dugout of Ukrainian Liberation Army? Why the whole country, multicultural, multi-language country, has to follow suit over one small part of a society? We have the situation when one battalion is fighting and 6 others are standing by, refusing. People do not want to die for the narrow project. It is a very simple thing when a person from Odessa will never fight for the idea that suggests to break his self-identity and make a citizen of Lvov out of him. He is from Odessa and he will remain a guy from Odessa, and the same from Kharkov. And the fact that we have maybe 1 million radicals for the whole country who are ready to struggle for their goals, politics is not done for 1 million out of 30 millions. Well, Alexei, Putin is not fighting with nationalism of the Ukrainian army or anything. He's fighting with Ukraine proper. He doesn't care much. It's a way for him to save and preserve his own power in Russia. So that's the goal of what you're saying, to turn Ukraine into this. Wait, if you will create a multicultural project, he will be hitting your multicultural project. All right, he may be attacking a multicultural project, but multicultural project then gives a different motivation to live and to defend the country. We will not have issues and struggles with recruiting people. The effectiveness of building up our military systems, military production will be much higher, to such a degree that Russia would think twice about even attacking Ukraine. You know, Alexei, one classic Nixon said that the genius is the one who listens for all advisors and then takes his own decision. So imagine, Alexei, a situation if Trump ever calls on you and you can give him an advice as a future president. What advice would you give him? Help me as the future Ukrainian president to conduct the changes I intend to conduct. That's a joking aside. What's serious? Oh, I'm serious. I'm dead serious. That's the only smart suggestion I can make. Are you seriously going to be a president in Ukraine in this situation? Of course, Dmitry. This is my progressor's interest, using literature, and this is my task. All right, let me try to bring us back to the topics that we started with, to the Trump's assassination attempt. Although we can return back to Ukrainian topic, of course, as well, which is also one of the biggest. So why do I want to circle back to Trump? I would not want today's stream to not have a visual part, which I think in the modern world, visually oriented world, is very prominent. If it's not the main, then it's at least one of the systemic features. Yesterday, I think it produced a huge impression on all, and maybe it will become the last drop for those who are concerned about Trump's electability. Those pictures from his rally that was spread around the world, how he's being shot at and how his Secret Service is trying to react, and the photo that was printed throughout the world, that same picture where he is showing the fist. And I'll bring it up to the screen, this one. That exact amazing picture. And many people have already found classic relations to other historic event, because there is a flag of the United States behind them, and many people saw references to the Allies going into Europe to Iwo Jima, and even to French Revolution. There are different allusions to that. Right, here's the revolution picture. So, anything you can say about the visual element of this event? Well, he is a classic political animal. He did the best thing he can do in the election campaign. He managed to raise his fist and make a stern face and say fight. And after that, he doesn't need to travel and convince anyone, and just keep saying that, hey, that's what happened. And he wins. Just with that, he wins. If he had done any other gesture, and if you remember, he at first ducked and covered, and then as he was led off the podium, probably on his political reflexes, he raised the fist and said, yeah, he's not just did that, he actually stopped his special service, he actually resisted them, and I think he doesn't have to worry much about the elections in November. I don't know if that was an analytical decision or his reflexes that worked, but in any way, he did the main thing. He expressed a strong gesture of being unbreakable. I'm trying to pick the right word in Russian. I have a word in Ukrainian for that. But yeah, that gest, that picture, that's a victory. So I have a question. I cannot not ask this question from one of my viewers. Trump said that I'm admiring the hatred of my enemies. I understand that I'm on the right way. Alexey, you are the addressee of so much hate that even those who just talk to you are also getting buckets of hate. Even Alexander will get a bunch with his stream. How do you deal with it? Does it charge you or does it upset you? Dmitry, I do not have enemies. I have patience. Can I steal this phrase from you? Right. This is great. I love it. Patience, they do inspire me to work better. Right. That's perfect. Thank you very much. Who do you consider to be my enemies? You did say that they are of a much different, much lower level. There is nobody to really fight here with. Well, that's true, but as I'm getting messages, despite of all demonization of Arestovych by Ukrainian media, he is a logical and smart man. That's the messages I'm getting in our chat as we're talking. Alexander, microphone back to you. Yeah, I just brought up this topic of the visuals, as I think it is an important feature. And I think Trump understands the whole force of modern media with this. Alex, can I ask you another question directly to you? I seldom ever have a chance to ask you a question as a human. Do you have some horrible feeling after Trump's victory 4 years later, he will leave America in some horrible condition, the way it was back in 29 or 30 of the last century? You know, Dmitry, I will dodge this question. First of all, I don't know. And second, I really don't know. Look, in the current turbulent situation, who could have imagined that we would be discussing Trump's assassination today? Well, yeah, black swans, they're flying in droves, right? You're absolutely right. Exactly, and you and I are actually, I think where we are, we're not just observing the swans, we're at that winter place where they usually stay for winter, and it's just black swans around them, and they're still circling around. So I'm not seeing that as the end of historic events. That's the situation we're living in. And some people are saying Trump has 100% to be elected now, on one hand. And it seems that it may be right. It may be a right prediction. But on the other hand, Arestovych, for example, is saying that we could expect perhaps another attempt at him. And you think, no, yeah, bullshit. After one, there probably won't be more. People will be protecting him. But who can say that that will all be exactly so? Nobody can. So that's why after his hypothetical election, about which I still have some concerns, I cannot predict what will happen 4 years later. I'll say one more thing, probably very uncharacteristic of me, but I want to congratulate all those who supported Trump. And his opponents also have to acknowledge that whoever organized this attempt, Trump behaved well, according to his own program. And it's always good to see that your opponent has good integrity and he's demonstrating good human features. And by the way, all Arestovych fans, I would also congratulate with that our best analyst we have on the Ukrainian-Russian war is behaving with such humorous boldness. I appreciate that too. Alexey, I think you're hypnotizing us here, and I have to take my hat off to you. I suddenly understood that I have to put some blame on you. That when you were answering the question about Syrsky, you answered perfectly about Bezuglia, but you have said nothing about Syrsky. Oh, I can answer about Syrsky too, the Ukrainian commander. He, I think, is ready to sign peace accords with Russia, because he understands rather well the worth of the troops he's commanding. But I also can say that at least 50% of his troops' inability to reach the borders of 90s and finish it with peace by force is on his own shoulders. Because under Zaluzhny, he was commanding about 73% of our army, because that's what the ground forces are. And he was using them in such a fashion that the blood calculator was drowning. He's a butcher. That's the problem. So, as a president, would you bring Zaluzhny back from London? Absolutely. Interesting. Listen, I also remember when there was a conflict and Zaluzhny was still commander-in-chief. You were, roughly speaking, on Zaluzhny's side. I remember one of the streams when you were discussing the situation, and you were saying that in order to remedy that escalation of conflict with Zelensky, they have to publish a picture immediately, right now, of Zaluzhny and Zelensky holding hand, shaking hands, or, yeah. If we were a country that has the interests of country, that's what we would have done. But unfortunately, we have the interests of different clans prevailing over the interests of the whole society. And Mariana was attacking Zaluzhny that he was not capable to mobilize the military enough, that he had lost some momentum early on. But I was present with a lot of things that she was addressing. I know the list of suggestions that Zaluzhny was presenting to the office of the president. And I know what office was answering and what office was giving him. And maybe there was 3% that we have done. And if we have done everything that he was asking for, like creating divisions, armies, and corps, as it is needed to be adequate in such a scale of a conflict, he was begging for that for a year and a half to create that structure in the army, and they denied him. Mariana perhaps doesn't know that. I do know these details, and of course that's why I'm taking Zaluzhny's side, because many of these decisions I was actively participating in. I was a fiery supporter of some of his ideas, and Mariana admitted that, but I actually was the one who was recommending Zaluzhny to become a commander-in-chief, and I did everything I could to help him get there. I'm sorry for getting there, but I can only remember another phrase from another classic about people not accepting the leader anymore. So what do you think will happen with Zelensky? I think today he is inspiring some support in Ukraine, or no? Let me dispel that aura for you. It's a psychiatry. People are holding onto Zelensky because nobody understands what will happen if there will be no Zelensky. This is not a positive motivation. This is a negative motivation, a motivation of horror that Ukraine will face if Zelensky and his very corrupt government, and we have super corruption this time. We have never had such a spike in our 30 years. But even if that is removed, they are afraid of what will happen after. They don't know what is beyond that framework because nobody is showing them what will happen. That's why they're holding onto Zelensky, and it's an old military principle, don't touch so it won't break. And same situation is in China. China doesn't know what to do. They kept Xi Jinping for the third term because let's extend it. We don't know what's going to happen. Same situation is in the United States. They're trying to do the same thing. At least one side is. And the world is at a stall. They don't know what's going to happen after. And they're trying to hold on to the previous world. And I'm of a different kind. I have a picture, a world picture of what's going to happen after. Despite all the efforts of the office of the president to try to bring me down, they made an enemy out of me for Ukrainian society. Remember, there were three most popular people at the beginning of war: Zaluzhny, myself, and Zelensky. We're the two of this trio. And people are holding on to Zelensky not because he is good and they trust him, but because they're afraid. Do you think Putin has 10 more years? Of course, at least a good 7, I think. Oh, shit. You know, what I wanted to ask, there was one thing that scraped me. You said that nobody is saying that, nobody is describing the framework of what's going to happen after that horrible end. So if I do understand you correctly, in my view, the horrible end is Putin. So I'm applying that to his existence. If Putin would present his Russian world in somehow fantastic fashion, then perhaps it would have flown okay for Ukraine. No, Ukrainians will not accept Putin's Russian world. But the treacherous end for Ukraine would be the audit of what happened. Bring Ernst & Young or Deloitte or somebody, and they would audit our everything. And that would be a catastrophe for our society. That will be similar to understanding of Germans when they realized at the end of Second World War who they really were and what have they done. It will be similar in scale, a complete collapse of worldview, economic losses, people losses. In 91, we started with 52 millions. Now we have maybe 20 in Ukraine, 20 plus. Every third Ukrainian is not in the country. And the government is suppressing consular services for them, saying that you're not Ukrainians, the ones who remained, those are the heroes. Ukraine is a big madhouse right now. That's why I'm suggesting that you make a step back, zoom out of this web or that slimy goo and believe that we are the warriors of light and we are resisting the treacherous Putin as it was at the beginning of 22nd. Then it was true. We're not like that. For 2 years, we're already not like that. We are dehumanized and perverted. And we've been raped by our own propaganda. We have people who are completely stunned with all that. And we don't know, our people don't know where to go. And they're afraid to acknowledge how far did their country fall. And if we bring in literary associations, it reminds me of a conversation with a stranger in Maxim. Oh, they will rise. Where will they rise? Right? Do you know what the inflation is? That we have issues with the soil that's not birthing, that there are some white submarines approaching. We used to shoot them at a distance, but now they're risking us. Oh, yeah, that book. Yeah, I have actually voiced it over. It will come out on YouTube soon. But The society at large is afraid to see what the audit of Ukraine will reveal. Absolutely collapsed governmental structure, a society that's going mad. Do you think Russia is a falling apart state? No, Russia, in my view, is a classic Bonapartist, borderline fascist dictatorship with some Byzantine elements, not exactly like a European style, more of a Byzantine, where there is some struggle of inner factions. And while the propaganda works, while there is enough money to feed people, that train will continue going. Strugatskys highlighted that in their books, that you cannot propagandize to people who are hungry, otherwise they'll go crazy. So as long as they have enough reserves, they're fine, they'll continue going. And we don't have these reserves, and we have done that to ourselves, not Putin, but ourselves. And if I was in the post of the president on the 24th of February, first, the war would have been done with our advantage, without these huge losses in economy, energy, and live personnel, as we are suffering now. But as Dmitry is saying, Ukraine did not deserve Arestovich yet. Let me quote you here. And my question is, will Ukraine deserve Arestovich at the end of this war? Oh, I don't know if Arestovich deserves Ukraine, because that will drop any kind of rating. Any person who will become the leader of Ukraine will be discredited forever at the end of his term, especially if he signs the peace accords. Dmitry, I'm not afraid of that. I'm ready. I have a question to you, Dmitry. Do you really believe your ears, what you hear? Yeah, I understand why Alexey Nikolaevich is saying that, because somebody needs to say that. And usually the most logical and sober people are saying the most horrible things because that's reality, and they create an impulse to change the situation, to get out of the cul-de-sac. And here I remember the words of Kipling. I'm horrified by what you are saying, but I'm amazed at how you're saying that. Well, I understand that the form prevails for you over the content, but I wanted to ask, Dmitry, let's mirror this situation upon ourselves. We do feel ourselves as the opposition to Putin. We have a person who comes and says, everything is horrible, your opposition is made of thieves and scoundrels, which is not too far from truth. And if you also send audit upon them, then you'll have a very bad picture, and people will be disillusioned. Everybody will be disillusioned. Do we need such a person right now who is going to tell everybody and us how horrible the situation is and what we really are? Subjectively, we don't need him. Objectively, we absolutely need him. And I would give a lot for Russia to have Russian opposition to have its own Arestovich. But where the heck can we find him? I cannot go for this. I am critically dependent on how do I look like, about my ratings and all, and the way people think about me. But the person who is going to throw his reputation into the fire of future ambitions, this is a very special character. And I want to ask one more question at the end. We talked a lot about who Alexey Arestovich is, and you will have some resume at the end of this stream based on what we discussed here, of course, with a literary view. I think we all understand, and everybody has it's his own opinion about Alexei. And Dmitry will summarize his literary compilation of Alexei. But I do want to ask a question of Alexey Nikolaevich. It will be, again, sorry, another literary association, so please treat it with some understanding. Remember, it's not exactly literary, but more like from the world of movies. You remember the movie Aid of His Majesty? And when the boy is asking the main hero, Pavel, are you a spy? And the famous answer, you see, Yura. Yeah, that's the main phrase that the spies should learn. If I'm saying that everything is bad and things have potential to be better, a linear consciousness understands that as the surrender to Putin. Oh, I do, right. I linearly say that it's a surrender. I'll be Dr. Watson for you. Please explain to me, why Do you think when opposition is criticizing itself, or when I criticize Russian opposition, and if you do the real audit and you discover that many of them are thieves and scoundrels, why does it mean that we are giving up and we're surrendering to Putin? I'm resisting Putin. He is my opponent geopolitically, situationally, in all kinds of ways. And I want to create a country, a Ukraine that will be successfully resisting. Why do people draw an equal sign that signing peace accords or criticizing Ukraine is equal to surrendering to Putin? That's Ukrainian propaganda. That's its effect on people and all these angles. Well, listen, myself and Dmitry were not too much exposed to Ukrainian propaganda. We're not part of that. We're not part of your media sphere. Well, there is still, however, a picture in Russian propaganda that if I'm criticizing Ukraine successfully, then I'm somehow siding with Putin. You know, there is a book written by Robert Scruton, The Thinkers of the New Left. He's saying a very remarkable thing there. He's saying that Soviet Union had a lot of interesting things, but it had a main difference between the USSR and the West. In the West, the ones who criticize society well, they're being rewarded. In Soviet Union, they're being exiled and being sent to gulags. And that's the thing that broke it. So that's the same thing in Ukraine. If those people who are criticizing the country successfully, they're not being praised, but they're being exiled. That's what I'm saying. Ukraine is Soviet Union 2.0 in some aspects. The egregor of Soviet Union has not disappeared. It's still permeating. It's Ukrainian Socialist Republic too. I want to change that drastically. I want to build a system that Putin will not be able to tackle, that will be more effective, that will be stronger, that will be better, that will be an envy of, that people would want to come and join from different parts of the world, including the West. This is my suggestion. This is what I see beyond the barrier, the solution that neither America, nor China, nor Russia, nor Ukraine have today. What is Putin? Today you have Putin, tomorrow you have Don Reba, then there is somebody else on the third day. Empires always have threats. As Sean Connery said in The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, or like in Men in Black, there is always a galactic cruiser, there is always some plague. The usual commoner does not have to know about that. Unfortunately, today people do know about that, and then there is a person who comes out and says, no, this all sucks, we need to change everything. And the propaganda then paints me as a Putin spy. Look at me. Do you think I can be bought and I can be turned? With my self-esteem, that's technically impossible. There are no money in this world, there are no projects in this world or threats in this world that one can do that, technically. My inner structure does not allow to do that. I cannot be turned. Well, why, Alexey Nikolaevich? You wanted to become a president of Ukraine. If somebody promises you that, I did not want to become president of Ukraine, and I do not want to. I'm going to doesn't mean that I want to. Those are two different things. So you're going to, but you don't want to. Right, exactly. I hate and detest thinking that I'll have to be in that office and to manage it. I've been there for 3 years, at the very top of it. I know what kind of job it is. It's a horrible place. You can probably not find a worse job than a president of Ukraine. I think, where's that republic where the pirates are capturing power? Yeah, you can probably be president of Somalia, and it's a better thing than being a president of Ukraine, because I know what Ukraine is from inside. I don't want to be a president, but I'm going to be, and these are two different things. You know, I'm sorry, and I understand that perhaps this is not comfortable to hear, but since the interview with Ksenia Sobchak that you gave to her, I thought that if I was at Putin's position, I would offer Arestovych to become some sort of Ukrainian Kadyrov. How? Give him money? How Putin manages in a Ukrainian situation? Will give a lot of money? I'll be given money, so what other levers? What else can he influence here? Well, he can put somebody in place with his money and his military, and you'd be, for example, providing ideological support. So you mean I would bring Russian troops to Bucha again? I don't know about Bucha, but literally what I heard about reformatting of Ukraine to be multinational project, not multi-poly. Symphony is I want to go for a symphony. I don't want to go for a multi. I want to go for a poly. That's a different project. I'm a right center. I'm not left radical. I'm not a Trotskyist who is going for multi. I'm going for poly. And this is symphonic sound. This is a different approach. So you're not going to be Ukrainian Kadyrov. Oh, never, God forbid. You want me to bring Russian troops somewhere to Bucha, to the crime they've committed? That's technically impossible. You know, I just got a fantastic... Let me explain to you once again. If we're talking about humorous boldness, I'll try to explain to you. Axiomatic idea, the basic idea that is behind this accusation that you're a spy, you may be Russian Kadyrov, etc. There is a conviction that I think that I consider myself lower than Putin and his FSB. Guys, I'm looking at them as Progressor. As Progressor and Don Reba, right? As some people who are some wayward civilization. Do you think Don Reba could turn Anton? Could turn Romata in that book? Right. That's technically impossible, exactly. We are in different phases of development. I'm not looking at them from below. I do not want to submit to save Ukraine. I'm looking at them as the little ants, if it's not geomentology, but it's something like that. I'm looking at them from way up high. For me, these are crazies who are doing absolute madness with a great country like Russia, with the culture and resources, and they're draining it in roughly the same fashion as Ukraine is doing that with Ukraine. And if I will be shaking his hand, I will not be looking at him from below. Be careful with Ukraine, please do not attack us. No, I'll be shaking his hand from a much higher position. What an interesting experimental specimen for our Institute of Experimental History. That is my positioning. And not, let's bow down to Putin to save the remnants of Ukraine. No, that's laughable. By the way, Alexey, an important question. In Putin's Russia today, is there a person similar to Duke Pampa? It's difficult to be a god. Somebody good within the bad that you can rely upon? No, frankly, I do not know the one like this. Remember, like that central, when the interrogation center in that book, the place that was stuffed to the brim with the worst of the worst. So, yeah, I don't know. Thank you very much for actually giving me a platform to discuss it. And I think you're the first interviewers with whom we got to that level of depth of my position. Because I was grabbing at my head thinking, how come so many people are so mistaken about my motivation and my positioning in the world? And look, you actually dug deep enough today to bring it up to the light. I actually got a message from one regular viewer right now. If until this stream I hated Arestovich, now I'm kind of afraid of him. I think you've been just promoted. And that's what I'm saying. What Kadyrov? What servant to Putin? How can a zoologist serve a nautilus? You cannot be turned by a nautilus. He studies that creature in an aquarium. That's it. Okay, so I think we should draw this to the conclusion. There's also a soccer match coming soon in the EU Championship. And I think Dmitry will give maybe a summary, a diagnosis, not a verdict, but probably give a characteristic to Alexey Arestovich. Before we go there, I want to ask you, you always are talking about transformation. You've been talking about transformation long before that, but in recent interviews, I keep hearing that word in what you're saying. For example, Yulia Latynina is undergoing some transformation and the others. What transformation are you living through yourself? I don't think I'm going through transformation. Oh, so it's us under your microscope? Look, I am standing on the same position for a long time already. The only person who I think gets it is Dmitry Bykov. Sometimes he misses, but I have not found others who get it. But I think after today's discussion, he got more basis and he starts to understand me even better. Understand one simple thing. I never changed my course. Arestovich serves only Arestovich and my own ideas. I may have allies, I may have people traveling in the same direction, travel companions, but for Progressor, who cares who owns the mouth of Tara River? Which side? Who owns Avdiivka? Who owns Donetsk? Have you sold to Putin? Have you not? Guys, I have a clear understanding that Earth is now struck the phase barrier in our civilizational development. For over 100 years, we don't have anything significant discovered in physics. This is old paradigm. Old paradigm is not working for new developments. We are in a global dead end. I see the way behind it, and I see how to get there. What Putin or Trump? You don't see them as big obstacles from where I am. Okay, so, right, I'm talking about anthropological differentiation between people, that we might have a new civilizational advancement upon us. And who are Putin and Trump in this regard? Small political activists in the time of human transformation? So who do you think wins from all that in this situation? I do, Dmitry. All right, good. So, Dmitry, your conclusion. We keep talking with you about who Alexey is. He was a trickster, a joker. He was given all kind of estimations. Does he look like a progressor based on the current conversation? I think he is, without any questions, because progressors do not always work in the framework for morals, or I would rather say that Arcanar, their experiment field, it has different morals than they do. And if we're talking literature here Dmitry reads a poem about propaganda and how a person wanted to become an enemy. So when I'm looking at Alexey, I think that it's better to be an enemy than to be a friend in these turbulent times. Of course, an enemy is more honest. You can hear the truth only from your enemy or opponent. Thank you very much. That was an honest discussion, I think. Very interesting and rather literary. Dmitry Bykov, Alexey Arestovich, thank you so much for participating.